Backyard. Stay informed with Pacific Mornings.
Te alofa everyone. Welcome back to Pacific Mornings on 5:31 PI. The time is 35 minutes past 7. I'm your guest host, Sēnā Folava Sa Nelly Chadwick. Right, up next we have Andre Afamasaga, whose journey is one of courage, conviction and deep cultural reflection. A former pastor, he now leads the Alofa Project, which is a human rights initiative grounded in Pacific values of faith, family and culture, working to dismantle the barriers faced by Pacific LGBTIQ plus people. His documentary film, Alofa, will world premiere as part of the Doc Edge Festival's Shorts program, screening this Friday at the Capitol Cinema in Auckland and later at the Roxy in Wellington. Andre Afamasaga joins us now. Te alofa lava uso, how are you?
Te alofa lava, Sangalit. Great, I'm very, very good. Lovely to see you this morning. So,
Yeah, likewise. Hey, I'm really excited about the chance to watch this. But for those who don't know much about the film, what's the pitch behind? Well, what's the premise behind the film Alofa?
Alofa is a 26-minute documentary about my life as a Samoan Rainbow person of faith, ex-pastor, someone who experienced conversion practices, and then just my journey through that. So it's directed and written and produced by an Australian called Rachel Lane, with support from Dr. John Wallace on that. And it's a story about me growing up in Lower Hutt and then being a pastor in Sydney and in Wellington and reconciling my faith, my culture, and my sexual orientation and accepting myself. But I really believe it's a story that's bigger than me. It's a vehicle, I hope, for other people to see themselves in my story. So other people that have got my own lived experience of the conflict, and then also
Yeah.
people that are around them, such as family members, church members as well. So while it's about me, I do feel like and believe that it represents the story of many within our Pacific religious faith communities.
And that's the amazing thing about this film, is that it is personal, right? It's not made up. These are your lived experiences. And I remember listening to you talk or do another media interview, and you mentioned it is not a unique story. And I just want to draw upon your personal experiences within the rainbow community and what you mean by that. Like the things you show and the things you tell in this film are not just experienced by you, but is this quite a common story that we see amongst our rainbow community, particularly the Pacifica rainbow community?
I think it really is. I think each of us can think of someone either in our immediate or our extended family or our friendship group, someone that we know is questioning their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or their gender expression. And we've seen people that have come to that identity in a way that has been supported by the people around them. And then we've seen people come to that in a way that where that reconciling of those things hasn't been so easy as well. For instance, either people getting kicked out of home or people being rejected or people having to suppress who they are. So the research unfortunately confirms that. And I think the tension for us, those of us who are Samoan or Pacific and also really place a high value on family, culture and religion, is that the tension point for us is that those places, faith, culture and family, are the things that bring us our happiness and our well-being. But it's also those same sites and those same settings and those same forces can also be the very things that might make us ashamed to accept and to be who we are. So that's the difference for us as opposed to non-Pacific people as well, because it's not enough for us just to walk away from our faith for some of us or from our family or to deny our culture. And so we really find, many of us find ourselves conflicted. And so the story is replicated. I know that by the research, such as the Manalangi community research, that shows Pacific people want to be part of their families, but they also feel, while there's many that are accepted, there's also many that feel there's a tension point there in acceptance.
Yeah, and on that, how did you find sharing your personal story? Because as Pacific people, we're often, I wouldn't say whakamā, but we don't tend to share the personal stuff. Like we love the laughter, we love the jokes, we love the banter, but the topics we're talking about here, they're often quite taboo. But for you to talk openly about them, how did you find that as a Pacific person, and what was the reception like? Because I can imagine when you're going public with this, you got to have those conversations with your ainga. You got to let them know, hey, look, I'm going to be talking about this. You got to talk to your church community, your family, your friends. How did you find navigating that space and feeling safe enough to be able to tell these stories, knowing it's not just impacting you, but it also brings into light your family, your faith, your culture?
Absolutely. Well, those, and to illustrate that point, those very three things, the faith, the family, and the culture, are the things that we're most proud of. But in this instance where you go to accept yourself, you realize that those can also become barriers to expressing who you are because it doesn't just affect you, it affects your family as well. So I think I stayed in the closet for so long. I went through conversion practices for 15 years and I didn't accept who I was till I was age 40 for that very reason. I was quite ashamed
Mm.
and I didn't want to bring disappointment upon my family. But eventually I had to say, if I kept going down this path, it wasn't going to be good for me. And to be honest, I was starting to feel suicidal thoughts. And
Wow.
so I think by that time, the first time I sort of publicly shared my story about being gay, that was a real struggle for me. And I was very
Mm.
intimidated and fearful of that. But in doing that, when I wrote an article that was published in a number of newspapers globally, that once I had done that, that sort of broke it for me in terms of I no longer became ashamed. Of course, I got some of the reactions were negative, but they were overwhelmingly positive. And then I
Mm.
think by the time the documentary came around, or I was asked to be the subject of the documentary, I realized that it's actually not so much about the shame that I have, Andre, that I've worked through. I realized that I could use my story in order to help inspire others, or at least have a conversation starter. So I think over the years, the thing that I was ashamed of, I'm most proud of now. I'm really proud
Mm.
to have an identity that I don't have to choose between, that I can have a coherent identity. I've been a person of faith, I've been a Samoan, I've been a rainbow man. Yeah, all of these things don't have to conflict with each other.
Is it quite when you came out of the closet? Did you feel a sense of relief? Because I can't even begin to understand what it must be like for you living. Was it like an alternative life? Like you didn't feel like you were you? And you say you till age 40 till you came out of the closet. Like what was that like in the build up to that? I just can't imagine. Like, can you explain to our listeners what
Yeah,
that's like
in
living
the
like that? And
film,
then that
if
moment,
yeah,
where you
yeah,
come out.
yeah, yeah. So in the film, people will see that sort of tension that I had when I was grappling with all those what I felt were pressures. And by the way, a lot of this happens in silence because I was feeling it in silence. And then in our cultures, as you already said, like these are taboo subjects, so no one is going to bring it up. These are subjects that we
Yeah,
don't
there's no help book, eh? There's
normally
no
talk
how
about.
to.
Absolutely. And not only is there no how to, there's also, to be honest, there's no permission structures. There's no permissive signals from the people around you necessarily. And so it does feel like you are alone and there's no permissive sort of levers that allow family leaders or cultural leaders or religious leaders to have these conversations so that the onus doesn't fall on the person in the middle. So yeah, it can feel horrible, but one of the things I will say is that the Pacific research shows that in my case, I felt like I needed to come out to express who I was, but it's going to be different for other people. There are some people in Pacific circles that never have a coming out moment, but they sort of just make themselves known to the family. They might turn up to a
Mm,
family lunch, for instance, with a partner.
mm.
And so it's going to be different for everyone, but ultimately that is really about people feeling accepted to be who they are. And of course, as many people are accepted, there's also many who are not accepted. And there are many people that never feel safe to come out of the closet, so to speak.
Yeah, and I want to get your perspective on that. Like, what's your current feeling on the ground now, where we are at as Pacific people, and your own lived experience of where we are? Are we at a stage where the majority of us are accepting of our people who are part of the rainbow community, or is there still this? I'm not too sure. Is it a generational thing? Do we have young versus old way of thinking? Like, what in your personal experience, what are you seeing in there in terms of people being accepting of our Pacifica rainbow community?
I think it goes in ebbs and flows. So I think more than ever, you will see stories like mine and many others. The wonderful thing is that when I was questioning my sexuality and questioning my faith, that when I would do Google search to sort of find out those stories, the only ones I would find are people that run conversion practices. In other words, the only stories that I'd come across are ones that would say that you weren't acceptable to God if you were to be a rainbow person. Now, however, when I put in a Google search, you will find so many stories of people like me and
Mm,
like others, including people who have decided to not maintain their faith, and that's fine as well. So
mm,
in that regard, there's more visibility, there's more examples now for young people or even older people to choose from. And by the way, the important thing in our communities is that I did come out at age 40, and that is kind of not uncommon for our communities. We're so
mm,
collective, we're so family minded that for many of us that we might not come to that outside of our adolescence. And
mm,
so while there's higher visibility, we're also susceptible as well to transnational global trends and forces. And so that means within our own communities here in New Zealand, but also currently in Samoa and around the Pacific as well, there is a conservatism by way of evangelicalism of Christianity that comes via mostly America. And, we've seen that over the years be a conduit or a vehicle to work against rainbow rights and against rainbow people. And currently, there's another wave of that occurring all around the world as well.
mm,
So it's in ebbs and flows. And so rather than us be susceptible to those global external forces that are not from Pacific, but by the way, they kind of we inherited that via colonization and missionization. And so then we move forward and then we move backwards. So there are ebbs and flows. So in the absence of all of that, or independence of that, it's important for us to build up our own stories and our own resilience within families and communities. And that's what I hope
y-
the Alofa documentary is to do, is to give another story and another perspective that you can
mm.
actually be all of these things and you don't have to choose.
Yeah, just on the rainbow community, to our listeners out there who are part of the rainbow community, who may still be in the closet, where you are at in your life now and your journey, what would you say to a younger self, or those who may be at the start of their journey trying to figure out who they are and where they belong? If you could have a conversation with them, what would you say?
I will say that you are so amazing. You're so awesome. I was ashamed of who I was, unfortunately, because of the things that I was listening to things around me, and um, and I was ashamed of that, and I was really fearful of what was the other side of accepting myself. And I have to say, it's the best decision I have ever made. I have a wonderful, amazing partner. I've got a family that love and accept me. I go to two different churches. I go to a church in Wellington, a Seventh-day Adventist church, and when I'm here in New Plymouth, I go to an Anglican church. I, I get to do amazing things in my life. And I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is that I think the acceptance of myself has enabled more well-being, more protection for me, more safety for me. And I think,
Mm,
and this is why it can't be on individuals such as me. I really believe it needs to be a whole of society, whole of community
takes a
approach. It
village, yeah.
really requires our leaders to be able to enable these spaces where young people and all people can accept who they are.
Mm. And if you want to hear more about this story, it's an amazing story. And there's so much more we haven't talked about. Being a pastor, growing up in the world, it's a beautifully powerful story that is true. But where can people go to watch the Alofa film?
So they can go to the Doc Edge. So if they go to Docu Edge, a lot of it's going to be shown in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. So go to Doc Edge and then slash Alofa, and they can find it. Please, I'm doing a Q&A tomorrow with the director, Rachel Lane, in Auckland. That's at 11 o'clock on Saturday, so come along to that. But they'll be screening throughout. And then also, please check out my website, alofaproject.com. And alofaproject.com is sort of what I want to do to help inspire conversations that come out of this as well, including education for religious,
Mm.
cultural, and family leaders as well. So alofaproject.com, and then go to DocuEdge and come and see Alofa. And I'll also be doing a Q&A in Wellington at Roxy as well.
Awesome. Whafte te lea, love also, love your work, love your
Thank you.
tautua, love your
So
service. Thank you so much.
likewise, yeah.
Awesome. All right, stay with us on Pacific.